Yep.
All right. So can you start?
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So good evening, everyone, and I welcome all of you to the inaugural session of Meet the Author series. Idea behind this series was to bring in some accomplished authors who've come out of sectors from all around us, who are not really born intellectuals or literates. It was just more to do with their passion that got them into writing. They all come from different walks of life, and but they made writing a passion, and gone ahead and kind of really done a very good job out of it. So the idea behind this series is to get such people to come and share their inputs with us in terms of how did they go about writing books or writing publications, and if they can share their tips with us for those who are keen on taking up writing as a hobby or as a passion or as a I would say a job. So I'm extremely delighted to welcome as a first ever guest for the series a very dear friend, Ms. Sonu Bhasin. I'm not sure, Sonu, whether I've told you this, but we've known each other for quite long. When right from my FPSB days, my early career days, and you were with Access that time. So I used to interact with your team and a couple of times with you, and I'd not really never imagined that one day we'll be sitting like this and me interviewing you. And of course, we've had some opportunity to work with each other over the last few conferences and some work. So we share. Of course, I share our passion in terms of stories around family offices, family businesses, Gen X and all. So that's fantastic. And you've been doing some great job in this. I see two books that have already come out. One I've read, other I'm yet to get my hands on. But the first one was very exciting. It gave us the perspectives of some business families and some leaders, which of course were not available. So it was fantastic. Unstoppable, I believe, is your second book, and I'm going to get onto that very soon. But thank you for joining us in this first inaugural session. And as I said, the objective here is simple: to get others who are keen on taking up writing, and and get accomplished professionals like you who've gone ahead and made a mark in this field, and hopefully have some tips or some do's and don'ts for how they can go and take up writing more and more actively. So to start with, can I just request you? I mean, we of course know that you graduated from St. Stephen's and then your MBA from FMS, and you had a very long and illustrious career in financial services before you took this up. But it will be great to hear from you, your journey in brief, right from day one to you really here as the editor-in-chief of Families and Business and independent director in a lot of boards. So over to you.
Okay, thanks, Aditya, and my pleasure to be part of the inaugural session. And yes, we do go back a long time. And while our paths may have not crossed over the constantly year after year, but it's always good to meet up with people who where I worked with or I interacted with. And in my new avatar, it is actually a pleasure to meet up with a lot of people who I did not know had different sides to them. Because you see, as a banker, one was just very focused on work and meetings all related to work. The biggest enjoyment or the biggest benefit to me after I started on my own, after I quit working full time, is this ability to interact with people across all domains, across all functions, without any set agenda in mind. And I've had some very fruitful and very enriching conversations. So I'm glad that we caught up and that, yes, we've had some work that we've done together, and hopefully we will continue to do that even more. But to go back to your question about my life journey, so very briefly, let me just share with the viewers that I did my BSc Mathematics from St. Stephen's College. Don't ask me why. I mean, those were the days when children had to listen to their parents, and when parents said, "Ye padhai karni hai," to wo karni padti thi. Catch my son listening to me to say, "Acha, go and do BSc Mathematics or BCom or whatever." So I did BSc Mathematics from St. Stephen's, and then immediately signed up for MBA from Faculty of Management Studies, which is FMS. And then I was fortunate, extremely fortunate, to get recruited by TAS, Tata Administrative Service. Now it's called TAS. And TAS, for those who don't know, is a cadre which is for the group. So, when we join the cadre, we are not recruited for a particular company. We are recruited for the group. And the idea is that all-round exposure is given. And it is a cadre to groom future leaders. And even though I say it myself, and it may sound like a bit of a bragging, but it at least when I joined in 1987, it was the most coveted job on any campus anywhere, and it was an elite cadre. And my professional learning has been what I learned at the Tatas. And if I look back, the one thing that I learned during my 13 years with the Tatas was that there is only one way to do business, and which is the right way. Everything else can be, is a technical knowledge, and, you can acquire a lot of skills, but this basic ethos about how to do business, what is the role of ethics, what is the role of doing business the right way, that grounding has stayed with me and is with me even now. And in the year 2000, I just happened to wander into banking. And since you deal with a lot of bankers, and maybe some of our viewers are also bankers, you would know that, in relationship management, people normally start as a retail relationship banker, and then a wealth manager, and then they gradually, move up to private banking and become a private banker. I actually started my banking career as a private banker, and then slowly worked my way down to also handling retail. And it was one of those happen chances. There was an opportunity that presented itself, and I explored it. There was a job offer, and I took it. And while, my first 13 years were without any role in any finance specific job, my next 14, 15 years were as a banker and as a consumer banker. And then about 5 years ago, after I had been through my banking, headed consumer banks for a couple of large banks, I think, again, it was happen chance that there was an opportunity which gave me time to pause and think. And I thought, and I decided that I needed to give myself a break for a year to figure out what I wanted to do for the next 25 years of my life. I was around 50, 51 years old at that time. And during that year, one thing that came with absolute clarity was that I did not want to do a full-time job. I really did not want to do a full-time job. And once that clarity set in, then of course I started exploring what I could do, where my interests lay. And by the grace of God, I could explore opportunities, keeping my interest and passion as primary. And families and business is an area that has been of interest since I think I turned a private banker. And when I checked on I researched about the kind of work people were doing in this area, I found that there was really nobody that was doing it in a structured manner. So I said, let me start doing it. And that's how I set up my firm, which very innovatively is called FAB, Families and Business. And started going down that path. And my business model has changed over the last 4 years. And now I focus largely on advisory and helping people be aware of issues that they need to address in their families if they want to build multi-generational businesses. And like you said, I've written a couple of books for Penguin. I bring out a magazine. I write for Economic Times, Business Today. I speak at forums. I speak to anybody who wants to listen to me. And I work with family businesses. And I'm also a director on boards of a few domestic and multinational companies. So this keeps me busy. And now, with this focus on work from home, I'm just wondering what's the excitement, because I've been doing this for the last 5 years, working from home. So this time is not very different for me from what I've been doing.
Super. So talking about your books, you've written two very successful books. First was The Inheritors, and then came The Unstoppable. And I, of course, gone through The Inheritors, fantastic collection of stories. So tell us more about, you of course told us why you chose family business as an area and where that the root comes from, in your handling of customers. But how about the book? I'm sure writing a book, it's a completely different ball game, even if you've worked with the same kind of people for years. So how did that come along, and how was the entire, right from that awakening call of, I want to write a book, to getting it on the shelf? How was the journey there?
So, writing is something that I've been doing ever since I think I was in class 4. I come from a family of journalists and writers. And so, I've always seen people in the house writing. And I remember, I don't know how many of your viewers would be young enough or old enough to recall a magazine called Champak. It used to be a very popular magazine for children in different languages. And I remember that my first story was published somewhere in the late 60s, early 70s, 1969 or 1970, 71 must have been the time when it was published. And I got a princely sum of 20 rupees for it. And then I continued writing for another children's magazine called Children's World, and then graduated to writing for a couple of newspapers. And then in the mid-90s, wrote extensively for a paper that was very successful at that time called The Pioneer. And I wrote for their business supplements. I was still working. I was the general manager for Tata Press Limited at that time. But it was just such a passion, and I enjoyed the whole process of writing. Then as I became a banker and, got into the hurly-burly of corporate world, writing for outside took a backseat. Though I continued writing a lot because there were proposals to be written, there were presentations to be written, so writing continued. And then when I finally quit working full-time and started working in the area of family businesses, and also had started working on the magazine, again, it was an opportunity that presented itself. I met somebody who would then turn into my future editor at Penguin. It was a social gathering, and we met socially, and he didn't know me, I didn't know him, and we started talking, and I talked about the work and the area of family businesses and why the family businesses are unsung heroes of the Indian economy, and the challenges that they go through. And he asked me whether I had thought of writing a book, and I said no. My husband's an author. He's written 5 very successful books, thrillers. I said no, it's my husband who's the author. I haven't written a book. So then he said, would you like to write a book? Now, this is like that Bollywood moment. If, Aditya Chopra comes to you and says, would you like to work in my movie? There is nobody who's going to say no. So when somebody from Penguin says, would you like to write a book for us? I just said, yes, of course, I'd like to write a book. But I was very clear that I didn't want to write an academic book. So it took me 6 months to flesh out the format of the book. And once we fleshed out the format and the editor and I agreed, a contract was signed. And then my first book, which is called The Inheritors, came about. And for me, what is important is to convey whatever I want to convey to the readers through story. Because stories are the most powerful way of conveying whatever you want to convey. And therefore, right from ancient times, we've had the Puranas, we've had, whatever Panchatantra Kahanis, and you have in the Western world, you have the fables of Aesop, and more recently, we have the Amar Chitra Katha. Whenever there is any learning to be given to people, I think the story format is the most powerful one. And therefore, I chose my editor and we chose 9 people whose stories we found through our initial research, we found very interesting, inspiring, and then I started working on the book.
Super. And so if we talk about writing, I mean, the entire process of writing a book, and this question is again for people who want to get into this. So what kind of machinery do you require around you? What kind of people what kind of support staff or support, people do you require around you? Someone wants to start thinking of writing a book. So
Okay.
Publisher, of course, is one, but.
Yeah. So writing is a lonely job, because you can't outsource your writing to somebody else. You may not outsource your research, and I guess every author has a different way of looking at it. I can only speak about myself, and the way I look at it, I do my own research, whether it is talking to people or using the digital media. I do my own research, I make my own notes, and then when I start writing, the only machinery I need is a laptop or a computer or whatever anybody wants to use. So it's not a very capital intensive job. It's actually a very labor intensive job where the only labor is you and yourself. And there is no set template about what do you need to do to write. The only thing is that how do I put it? So somebody who wants to write, that writing that first paragraph or writing that first page is very, very difficult, because any of the viewers who are watching this, if any of you want to write a book or have ambitions of writing a book, just try how difficult it is to sit on your computer and write that first paragraph, because there's so much of hesitancy inside to say whether it will be good, whether it won't be good, or what it is, what will I write. So my advice to anybody, if I can give advice to anybody, is to just let your thoughts flow onto the paper, so to say, on if you are handwriting, which I don't know if anybody does now, but let it just flow onto that blank page. And the good thing is that unless you share it with anybody, nobody will see it. And the hesitation of writing that first paragraph or that first page may take a week for you to overcome, but just persevere. It doesn't matter if it is gibberish. It doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense. You just need to go and start writing. It's almost like for people who've been through therapy, the first time you go to a therapist, it's very difficult to start talking because you don't know what you want to talk about. You're embarrassed. You're carrying so much of baggage inside, and you don't know whether that therapist is going to judge you. It's very difficult. But, people who've been through therapy tell me that once they start, then they can't stop. They just cannot stop, because it's almost a kind of a release. And when you start writing, you will realize that it is a kind of release. So just persevere, write that first paragraph, write that first page, and then just let your mind take over, and your mind will then will get you to write. If write is basically typing, but your mind will then take over, and you will be amazed at what comes out.
Sure. So my question again, Sonu, is more from on behalf of the people who are yet to, like you told me, you've had a connect with the writing world right from your childhood, and here also the publication house and all, you're connected to them. So they knew you knew them, and you were around such people. But about people who are not, and they're not natural writers, or they don't come from that kind of a background, and they want to put. So if there are any do's and don'ts, let's say for example, in terms of how someone can improve his writing and take. So you said start writing, yeah, that is one part. But are there any other do's and don'ts in terms of how someone can develop himself as a writer? Do you have some mantras, that easy mantras, quick fix mantras that you can give us?
Okay, so for writing, fortunately today you don't have to write in Queen's English, because most of the readers don't read Queen's English. It's a very chalta hua language that you need to use if you want a wider readership. While not everybody may be able to write in the correct, so there may be syntax errors, there may be grammatical errors, but those are matters of detail, and there are editors for that. Those are copy editors for that once the book does go into publication. What the publishers are looking at, and I'm not a publisher, but I do bring out a magazine, and in that sense I do also think that I can qualify as a magazine publisher. But my conversations with some of the well-known publishers, everybody is looking for good content, and content could be a story, it could be a message that you want to send across, it could be learnings that you want to share with your readers and audience. So it is about what the content is, which is more important. And once you figure out what the content is, and then when you start writing, and if you are passionate about it, if it is of something that is of interest to you, you will find it easy to write. And whenever anybody is writing, I think the one thing that they need to keep in mind is it something that my neighbor's teenage son or my niece would like to read? Sometimes what happens is we get caught in our own grandiose, and we get caught in all the in trying to showcase all the knowledge that we have. But it is very important to remember that the average reader is not looking so much of how much do you know, but what is it that the reader can take away from the book. And therefore the learning that has to be transmitted through the book has to be in a manner which is easily understood by the reader. And if the reader also enjoys it, I'm a great proponent of the story format, because the stories make it interesting. If the reader also finds it interesting, chances are that he or she may spend more time with the book.
Sure. So you also spoke about the magazine, Families and Business, and so how's that different? I mean, that vertical different from a book? I mean, what's your experience been in running it? How is the circulation and all? If you could share some more light on that.
Okay, so let me just take 2 steps back and explain why I focus on the area of family businesses. So the statistics are quite startling. 90% of world commerce is in the hands of family-owned businesses, but 70% of all family businesses last only 1 generation. And only 3% make it to the 4th generation or beyond. And whichever metrics that you look at in terms of employment, in terms of contribution to GDP, family-owned businesses are the largest contributors to whichever economy that they are present in. And therefore, it is really such a waste of everybody's time, effort, energy, money, if 70% of all family businesses fail to perpetuate. And there have been enormous studies done around the world on finding out why family businesses fail to perpetuate, or they have such high drop-off at every generation. And you'd be surprised to find that it is nothing to do with the business. it has to do with what happens in the family. So, but as bankers, as consultants, as lawyers, as management consultants, nobody really talks to business owners about their family. They always talk to them about their business. And even when you get in these suited consultants to work out a plan for the next 40 years or 50 years, they will focus only on the business. But like you have a strategy for the business, every family needs a strategy for the family. And for the larger families, you have the McKinseys of the world, and if you are the Reliances or the Birlas or the Bajajes, you have Deepak Parekh advising you, or KVK advising you. But the SMEs that form the bulk of family businesses, when I checked the statistics, there were almost 5.75 crore SMEs in India and growing every month. These are the people that nobody wants to talk to, because they're not oomphy enough, they're not sexy enough. They won't give you the amount of fees that a large business will. And it is the SMEs that need this advice the most. They're hungry for this knowledge. So when I started focusing on family businesses, I deliberately chose the target segment as the SMEs. And I find through the work that I have done that the SMEs are very open to taking advice, but maybe not from people. So, if I go to a patriarch who spent the last 30 years building a successful business and tell them about something, they may not be very happy about it, because, they say, hame sab kuch aata hai. But if they read about it, if they hear about it, they absorb much more. And that's why I started the magazine, because the idea or the objective of the magazine is to build awareness about issues that are important, that are core to family businesses on the family side. But, those are issues that nobody talks to them about. So the magazine actually showcases success stories, also talks about failures of family businesses, entrepreneurs. I have experts from around the world writing for me. And I must say that people are very, very generous with their time. It is a magazine that it's free online, because it doesn't have a subscription. So you can go to the website and download it. Around, through my own network, our own network, and through the network of our associates, it reaches over 20 lakh individuals around the world per year. And we have some of the best names in family businesses writing for us. And it is a way to showcase, again, stories about what makes businesses successful. So, and then you also asked me about the difference between books and the magazine. So in the magazine, I try and focus on the more of the SMEs, because those are the people whose stories need to be told. For the books, I do choose the more well-known people, because it is their stories that provide a lot of inspiration to people who want to become like them. And let me just tell you that, when in my first book, I had stories of Amit Burman, who's now the chairman of Dabur. I had story of Tara Singh Vachani, Analjit Singh's daughter. I had a story of Pooja Jain of Laksa. These are just 3 names. And if I take these names to you, and for the people who are watching this, the first thing that comes in their minds is ki, inki life mein kya problem hai? I mean, these guys come from very well but each one of these, and these 3 specifically, each one of them has stared at failure at its face. They have looked at failure, and they have admitted to me and they have confessed that if their last name wasn't the name that they had, they would have been fired from their jobs because the business was facing considerable changes. But in spite of all of that, each one of them have made their businesses a great success. And this is a learning I do want to convey to people, that it's not only that poor people like us that have challenges, even successful people have challenges. It's just that nobody talks to them about it. For some reason, people don't want to talk about, it's not that these people don't want to talk about their failures. They're very open about talking about their failures. It's people who talk to the successful people choose to focus only on the success. They don't want to talk about what the challenges that they faced. And I do that, and I bring it out through stories. And the feedback that I get is that people have learned a lot from how these people managed the problems in their life and problems in their businesses.
Sure. So you featured quite a few families in that book. And if I have to ask you, let's say which story or which family was the biggest surprise to you in terms of your perception before meeting them and after you met them? So, who really surprised you?
Okay, so that's actually a no-brainer, because my next book was about that family, which was the Dhingra family of Pains. Now, before I went to meet these each of my protagonists, I did a digital research, and I wanted to find out who they were, what were they like, and therefore I went for my first meeting with a little bit of knowledge of कौन कैसा है, क्या करा है उन्होंने. But when I went to meet Kuldeep Singh Dhingra for the first time, I went totally in the dark, because there was nothing about them as a family. There were articles, some articles in Forbes about them and their businesses, but there was nothing about them. And the first time I went, I met him as a stranger. He met me as a stranger. But we had a meeting that lasted for 2 hours. And what I found so endearing was the openness. Here is, the second largest paints company in India, 8th largest in the world, probably the richest Sikh family in the world. But the openness, the enthusiasm, and the interest that he had in telling his story was completely mind-blowing. And the Dhingra family is one chapter in the book, but both Penguin and I found the story so fascinating that Penguin then asked me to do a business biography on Kuldeep Singh Dhingra and his company. So that is a truly, truly surprising family, and the story. And the story is very inspirational. We talk of Sam Walton, and we say that he had a little store in Pentonville where there were some 2,500 people in that town, and then Walmart became one of the largest companies. So Kuldeep Singh Dhingra was a shopkeeper in Amritsar almost 40 years ago. And from sitting at the shop and selling paints in 1969 or 70 to where he is today, it is again an inspirational story. It is awesome. Truly an inspirational story, and with lots of twists and turns, and masala and mirchi and all of that. So if you haven't read Unstoppable, I strongly recommend that you read Unstoppable. People tell me that they finished it in one go. They got onto a flight in New York, and by the time they landed in London, they had finished it, and then they wrote me an email to say how much they enjoyed it.
So is writing a biography a different experience or ball game than writing vis-a-vis your first book, where you're just featuring them with smaller chapters, but writing a biography, you really get to know the people you really spend more time. There's so much more work that goes in. So are they two different things, or the first book was more of a precursor to, writing a biography going ahead?
So
Did you find
both
any
are,
much of a difference in terms of
yeah. So both are stories. Both are stories. But if you know, a chapter can be likened to, say, one episode of a television series, a biography is more like a 3.5 hour movie. So obviously there is far more
Of course.
that is required. It's more intense interaction with the protagonist and also the people around him or her, family, friends, business associates, people going back 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, extended family. So it's a lot of research. It's a lot of research. It's a lot of talking to people. And I can speak only about myself. Since I enjoy talking to people, since I enjoy meeting people, for me it wasn't a chore. For me it was a very it was a very pleasurable exercise to call up people, to go meet people and spend 2 hours and 3 hours with them talking about the protagonist, which was Kuldeep Singh Dhingra. So it didn't bore me. It was very interesting to me. But yes, it was then quite a challenge to put those 200 hours of conversation that I had on recorded tapes to put that into just about 90,000 words. So that was a challenge. But hugely, for talking about myself, hugely enjoyable exercise. And for anybody who wants to write a biography, my caveat is that if you don't like the person that you're going to write about, it's very difficult to spend 1 year of your life with that person.
Right.
And his associates. So it is imperative that there is some connect or some mutual respect between the author and the protagonist.
Sure. So my last question: what's next?
What's
Collection
next?
of stories.
Well, what's next is we're just waiting for this to get over. Because I am sure that there are going to be phenomenal stories about how people managed themselves and their businesses in this troubled times. So if we look at the time, say the pre-corona, during corona, and post-corona, I think post-corona, the way the family businesses have handled not only their businesses but themselves, I think will be great matter for books. Because as is with all of us, for most families, this must be the longest time that they've spent together without stepping out. And therefore, a lot of those corners would need to be smoothened. A lot of things that were hidden or brushed under the carpets, I'm sure, would have come out. There must have been explosions in some families. And especially for family businesses that have businesses on one side and their family dynamics on the other, this time would have been extremely interesting. And I speak interesting from my point of view as an author, because I would love to go back 2 months from now, 3 months from now, and talk to family businesses about how they handle their families during this time, which would then impact the way that they handle the businesses. So I see a great amount of matter, which is just waiting to be taken out and put into books or articles or whatever stories, and to be told to the world, because there is a lot of learning, because each family would have handled it differently. Because in some business families, there are 24 people that stay together. In some business families, there are 4 people that stay together. So how the patriarch would keep 24 people together would be very different from how somebody who's got a family of 4, how would they keep together. So it's actually going to be very fascinating.
So quickly, if we have some questions from the audience, we can take those. Otherwise, I have a couple of them more for you lined up. Let me check if there are a few. So Guys, any questions you want to ask Sonu?
Actually, Aditya, what you could do,
yeah, till I get one. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you can share the link of my magazine. It's called Families and Business.in, and maybe when you Families is FAMILIESAND business.in, and the magazine is there for download. Or if you go to my LinkedIn, you will find the links there for the magazine. And Aditya, what you could also do is to share my either LinkedIn profile or my email ID, which is sonubhasinfab@hotmail.com. And if anybody has any questions or comments, they can just give the reference of this conversation that they may have watched, and I'd be happy to engage with them.
Absolutely, we'll do that, and also be uploading it on our YouTube channel for all our members within the next couple of days. But a couple of last few questions on my end. So one is for the aspiring authors who want to watch this or are watching it. You have any? Would you like to prescribe any links or any publications or any what do you say, educational material that can help them hone their writing skills? So are there any websites or blogs or portals which can help them, or any groups which can help them hone these things? Anything in your mind?
So and again, this is my view, and it may not be the gospel truth, but I will just tell you what I believe. So if there are people who want to write, my advice would be write and then share whatever you've written with friends who you trust and whose advice you trust. If you are fortunate enough to find a group of 3 or 4 people who want to write, a self-help group really works well, where the 4 of you could meet, 3 of you, 4 of you could meet, say once a month, discuss your own book ideas, go back and write, share it with your fellow group members, and critique each other's work. What is important is not not a learning how to write. It is learning how to convey the message that you want to convey, and that you will learn whether you are successful at that only if you share what you have written with some people that you trust. And the reason I keep saying trust people that you trust is that when even today when I write, so I suppose I have to write an article for Eco Times, let's say, and I write it and I give it to my husband to read. Now I am actually on tender hooks to say, wo kya bolege mere ko? Matlab, is it good? Is it not good? And I'm, after having written so much, I'm still on tender hooks. So I can appreciate that when somebody is, wanting to write, you're very possessive about what you've written. You're very apprehensive about what people will say. And and therefore it is important to share it with people who you trust, because one malicious comment or one unintended hurtful comment can put you off completely. So wait for that first paragraph to flow, and then wait for that first page to flow. Write a little and then share it with some people that you trust. And if you can get a group of people together, a self-help group of wannabe writers, I think that would be the best.
Sure. Super. So I think we are out of time. So we'll need to kind of wind up the session. But thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to do so much more work with you on this.
Yeah.
And of course, now I mean, apart from the common passion, I think the kind of just work or, the clarity you're bringing to the family business world is awesome. I think I've been a big fan and been following up fan, even your books. So look forward to do more engaging work with you, whether it's through books, publications, conferences, and all. And if our viewers or students or members have any queries, we'll be happy to direct them to you.
Sure, sure,
Yeah.
and thank you. I feel really privileged that I'm part of the inaugural session, and I wish this series the very best. And you're doing great work as well, and I do look forward to doing some more work together. And again, if there are any queries that any of your members have, either directly or through you, I'd be very happy to answer them or address them or engage with them. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Take care, stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye.